Hey, Johnny, it's Melanie. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
You look good. That's a really good. Wow.
Trying to set up the gimbal here.
Okay. You can make anybody co-host if you want.
All right.
And then I can join from my phone now. I didn't even realize that. So that's what I'll do when I get in the car.
Perfect.
Okay. That looks nice.
Right. Are we recording now or closer
No,
to
I can, I
3:30?
mean, I can turn it off. It just does that automatically.
Hello, everyone. Happy Saturn's Day. It's beautiful and sunny here, and nice and warm.
Hey, Johnny.
Hey, Randy, haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
pretty good. Glad I can make it.
Good, good. All right.
Great.
So, yeah. So this is our Saturday. We're gonna have try to have every week Escape from Babylon series focusing on homesteading. And rather than call it episode 1, 2, 3, and so on, I figured we're gonna go by topic. The first half of the show, I'd like to try to stick to the topic and any questions or anything, and then the second half will be open Q&A, or anyone can jump in with their experiences, anything to do with homesteading. So for this second episode, I decided to focus on something I have never done before and heard about it for the first time maybe a month ago in a book. So if you're looking for a detailed YouTube video on how everything you need to know about Hugel culture, this is probably the wrong show. But if you're looking for an honest looking into the advantages, what it is, and you're curious about it, then by all means jump in. And if anyone has experience, I know some of you guys have, I would love to hear your input. So we're going to start off just a quick rundown. If you're not familiar with, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Hugel culture. It's a German word for hill culture. The idea is you use rotting, decomposing wood in a mound type environment. Typically you put several layers of compost, tree branches, twigs, and you finish it up with soil, and you end up with a mound that is great to keep the water in, to have lots of nutrients. It won't erode. And I know for the first couple of years, it's good to stick to shallow rooted plants and shrubs. And but eventually, once the trees decompose, you can get some pretty good root system in there. So that's kind of the rundown of what I learned about a month ago. And the reason it came up, I have acreage here up in Ontario, Canada. I'm gonna just give you, it used to be a sawmill. There's about 1 acre, 1.5 acre area that is nice and flat and sunny. But there is a lot of, because it used to be a semi-commercial sawmill, there is quite a few logs, different stages of decomposing. There's a massive mound of, well, here, I'll just show you guys. There's the red pine forest. And there's where the sawmill used to be, and I just purchased a sawmill, which I'm in the process of setting it up. But there's, different piles all around. There's a very large pile of wood chips, and that's where we've been storing chicken shit with wood chips and wood shavings, twigs too. And there's lots of root systems and decomposing trees. There's a nice big pile there. Some are softwood, some are hardwood. There's 2 massive piles there, and there's a couple more that are very decomposed further up the woods. So the idea is, with this layout, with the sun I get, the soil is very sandy here, so I can't really grow much right now. And my wife is actually going to start a garden up near where the trailer is on the other side of the creek there. So that's pretty good soil. But we decided we're going to try to incorporate Hugel culture here. And I'm trying to find the optimum layout. I want to have a couple of rows, and this area gets lots of sunshine, and it's gonna put all these logs that are just sitting here rotting away to good use. So that's a quick 101 of why I got interested in this, and what the benefit would be. So if anyone has experience setting up,
I've used that technique for just basically since I started gardening about 10 years ago. You know, I actually just picked it out of one of those kind of intuitive net searches where you don't know how you got somewhere, and you know, it sounded cool to me, and you know, I was reading it in German, and it just seemed like an interesting thing, and I just wanted to get started. So I just had a little community crops garden, you know, like a neighborhood garden that you can get, and I started out just using like small, like kind of, I call them stealth hugels, because I didn't want to make it too tall. And you know, they say a full-size one's like 7 feet tall, but I've never built, I don't know if it's that practical. It has to be so huge that the hills are so steep, you really can only do like plant starts, and you can't do things from seed very well. And a lot of the techniques that people use are simulations of the original Hugel culture technique, you know, applied but the thing I like to do is just that is kind of the heart of it, is not an actual technique. It's using stuff off your land is part of it, you know, and people miss that a lot. They just think it's like going to the store and getting components and then you build your Hugel, but a big part of it is to use stuff off your land. And the reason for that is plants respond to that. Like when I saved seeds from the same variety of carrot and planted it next to some, you know, organic, like, you know, good seed of the same variety, you know, and I know that this is true from the farm I work on. That's a biodynamic farm that, you know, it's a weird thing. It's like they buy their seed, but if you're biodynamic, they know that, I mean, some of the things they save their seed for, but a lot they have to buy it because you have to show that it's organic. So then you have to purchase your seed. You can't just say, I saved my seed. And that's part of it that I don't like about it. You know, the regulations don't let you fully explore the biodynamic technique. So that's why I call it a scientized version. It's kind of a modern version of the official technique that does employ, you know, for instance, but anyway, it really seems to work better when you get stuff off your land. Like I got a lot of underbrush and things like that, and there are certain things to stay away from. The obvious advice that I can give off the bat is to make sure that you're not getting black walnut, because it has juglone in it that inhibits plant growth. And so that's a wood that you don't want to use for sure, black walnut, or leaves from a black walnut. So if you're in a black walnut area, you just want to avoid that as a Hugel resource. And the same with cedar, and you know, high tannin content wood is gonna break down slower. And so a lot of people will like Johnny, you say you got a lot of red pine and things like that. I haven't used pine much, but I think if you chip it and break it down a little bit, it can help with it. It does have a lot of resiny sapwood in it and stuff, but I don't think it's like cedar or redwood or things like that really take a really long time to break down. But
yeah, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about the red pine. Red pine decomposes very quickly, and there's really not that much here.
Yeah, well, if the decomposed part, it's a better bet because it's already got a start. You know, it'll help.
The large piles that are decomposing, a lot of it's maple, a lot of some spruce as well. I'm not sure if spruce is good, but I was gonna aim for bigger logs. Like I'll be getting a used tractor in about a month to help with the logs with the sawmill. So I plan on setting this up this year. I'm not going to grow anything this year, but I want to dig fair size, pretty big trenches to try to put as many logs in. And like I want to, there's a lot of birches here and aspens. Do you know if those two are pretty good? Sorry, I don't hear you.
Yeah, it's just it sounds like you have a lot of excellent wood source that's already partly broken down and aged, even though they say you can use green wood, which you can, you can mix it. I think it's better if they're smaller pieces of green wood. And I wouldn't use like the bows, like the needles, because that will make it acidic soil. But you said you had sandy soil. That can be good. That acidic sandy soil can be good for like ground cherries. Have you ever tried growing those? They're like I think they're like a tomato related, but they're called golden berries or Inca berries sometimes. But they're little fruits you can grow, and they grow well, just neglected in sandy acidic soil, and they're good keeping things, and there's things that you can use that. I have a sandy kind of a loam soil that really didn't have enough organic matter. And so what I've been doing is slowly layering it with this fresh grass that I let grow as a meadow and turned out to be like a prairie meadow. And just from my experience as a cheesemonger, I know that like in the Dutch, the first grass of spring is very high in calcium and protein. They make a big deal, and they make this spring cheese from it, and it's got extra of everything in it. And so I've been, before the grass goes to seed, because I don't want to plant seeds, I've been just hand picking as I kind of, and I put thin layers so it doesn't get too much of a hot breakdown, because it can keep away from roots of perennials, because it can get kind of hot as it breaks down. But if you do it thin and just do a little at a time and let the sun and keep it wet and let it break down, it feeds the plants and will provide a little bit of organic matter for you just have to be careful not to lay it on too thick. But this is a good time to do it if you let your grass grow long before it grows to seed. It's a good resource, because leaves take longer to break down. If I was in the situation, I would just started last year with this hugel. It's the biggest hugel I've had, and I found a giant, like 100-year-old elm tree that had been sitting for a few years, and I dug it into the ground like what you were talking about, like about a foot and a half, just because I know
Is there a limit? Is there a limit to what size logs you can use as the base?
Well, there's not a limit, but it does affect how it breaks down. What I do is I use some big logs this time too. Maybe, the biggest ones maybe like about this big, but just on the bottom. And then I get smaller and smaller ones, and then I try to lay it on top. Now I had the optimal situation where I had this thick turf that was like this thick, or this thick, with a lot of dirt on it, a lot of black dirt. And so the absolute traditional way that will be hard to find, filtering through the millions and millions of ways that people do hugel, the traditional way is just to have aged wood, like old brush, and then you wet it. You wet the wood first, like not in the ground. You wet just the wood, and you maybe do that for 2 or 3 days, and
Yeah.
wet the
Well,
wood.
I wanted to show you the logs I plan on using. They put them deep in the forest. Let me just spin it around. But I don't think I'll need to wet them, because they're very rotten.
Yeah.
And
Well,
there's quite a few of them.
You can maybe just wet it a little bit, but the idea is that you start with big logs, you get gradually smaller, and you try to keep it so the dirt won't fall through when you flip over the turf. That kind of helps keep the dirt from falling through. And then I'll save the dirt. As long as I have good dirt, whatever good dirt there is that I dig out, I'll save that aside and put it on top. And but yeah, if you layer it and get smaller and smaller pieces, it helps keep the dirt from falling through. And then that's the main technique, just structurally, you know, so that you start big and you get smaller and smaller, and then you lay the stuff on top. That's just the basic. And the reason that I've experimented where, like, there's a guy here that his goal was to make the world's longest Hugel, and he's got up to like 3/4 of a mile so far. And
Nice.
he tried it a different way where he runs this hose in there, and you know, he did it kind of in a different way where he just got a backhoe and he had some old wood and he just piled it up kind of roughly, and then he just piled a bunch of big chunks of turf on top of it. But he mostly was just growing tomatoes in it. And it doesn't seem like it works. In my experience, when I tried one side by side, where I charged one with water and I did the other one the old-fashioned way, the old-fashioned way works better, because the goal of the Hugel culture is to invite flora and fauna into the mound, and it won't work if you keep it all wet. And so then you get snakes instead of mice, you know, which is beneficial, and helps keep things in balance with insect life and things like that. You know, the idea is that if something comes in, there will always be something else that will keep it in check. And I find that to be true. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that your mound culture or the Hugel culture, you know, literally means that, like, you're building a living thing. So that's an important part of the concept too.
Thanks, Pi.
Yeah.
And do you know if there's, I'll get to you in a sec, Anna. Thanks. Do you know if there's any advantage to lining them up north, south, or east, west?
The biggest advantage that I found is doing it in an arc, like a sun arc. Like, what I did is you know, I just kind of roughly tracked with my eye the track of the sun, and I did a couple of sun arc Hugels, you know, then that optimizes the sun on both sides of your Hugel. And then since I'm kind of up on a hill, what I do that I find greatly helpful, in my case, I had these broken pieces of driveway concrete that I used on the sides to help shore up the dirt, you know. But then also, the waddling technique works great. If you have, you know, even old sticks, even if they break while you're doing it, once you get them woven together, you just once you get your little wall there, you stick these sticks inside in the dirt, and then you just weave sticks through them. Once you get them woven, it's very strong. And then I put a wood in the center, and that allows you to put a board across on the waddling, and so you can water it and tend to your crops and weed them without stepping on it, you know, because if you step on it, it kind of wrecks the dirt. So that's a structural way to, like, tend to your crops, and it blocks the wind for tender seedlings. And instead of using row cover, I just use woven panels that I lay across the waddling, and then I use that, because it's really the wind. You don't save any heat, like row cover and all that. It doesn't keep heat in. It's the wind and moisture. That's what's really saving the plants. And people often mistake it as like a greenhouse type thing, but it's just barely a temperature difference, except the wind, cutting the wind is the big thing that it does. So anyway,
Yeah,
that's
I love your idea with the concrete, because there's one area of the property where the previous owners over the years, because they've had this property in the family for many generations, and there's a lot of they were dropping off a lot of broken concrete piles, and it's right by the ravine, which I kind of want to clean up, and so I wasn't sure what to do with
you know,
them.
it's just like the old English style where you use stones, but I just had broken pieces of concrete instead, so I just used that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anna, you want to go ahead?
Hey, Johnny, thank you. You guys hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, all
I'm
good.
gonna assume yes. Okay. So Johnny, I just wanted to I wanted to share this little mound bed that I did. It's my first year with it. Since it's your first year that you're going to be doing that, I just wanted to share some of the success that I had with it. And I didn't realize that I was somewhat using a Hugel method. It was much more mounded last year, but the only thing I didn't do was put the large logs on the bottom. I dug down a little and I put sticks and leaves and such, and then layered compost on top. And I did that all last spring, and I just planted right, I put the compost on and I put the mulch on top, and I planted right in it first year. Some crops did really bad, like I had really short carrots, did horrible. The peppers did horrible, and the corn did horrible. But what really did great the very first year was zucchini, summer squash, and cantaloupe, and the cucumbers. So I just wanted to share this, thing I had and what success I got, even if you wanted to just, get right to it. And that's just what I wanted to share. The Hugel is something that I'm just really learning about, but I somewhat sort of use those methods here. And I had some really great success last year. So you could even, just get right to it and just plant what crops would do well in there.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just naturally, it's a good way to reuse and recycle what's on your land and get the nutrients back into the soil. And in terms of like, I do want to grow, like we will have a vegetable garden, and because we're in a colder climate, we will have a few greenhouses closer to the house. But in this back area where we're going to be doing the sawmilling, that's where I wanted to try a couple of improve the soil. And I know it takes a couple of years to get, so you can do the deeper rooted stuff like carrots and certain types of, probably corn is one of them as well. But there's a lot of wild raspberries and blackberries all around this opening. So I would definitely, I was thinking of putting them, taking the best batches of them and put them right in the middle. Makes it easier to pick the berries too. Or
you should be able to do root crops is one of the things that can do really well. It's just that like carrots require really consistent watering. And I just want to point out that there's a difference between a raised bed, like even if you put wood under it, and a hugel, because like a hugel, will be open to wildlife on the sides, like even the stones, there's like all kinds of little snake passages and insect holes, and rabbits are living in there now, and gave me a bunch of rabbit pellets for, since I didn't have any fertilizer, I don't have any livestock or anything, and I much preferred doing something off my land, even though I could have got some aged manure off the biodynamic farm. And there's simple things you can do, like biodynamics, they always have some special person that's an expert that prepares your fertilizer, but it's mostly just yarrow plant, that's been broken down into an extract, and you can just grow yarrow and throw it in your compost pile, and it's a compost accelerator. And so I like to just keep it simple. I haven't gotten expert in the fancy ways that people, because I'm doing everything by hand. All I use is a garden fork and a shovel and a saw. Is what I build my entire hugel with. But the soil structure does take a little time, and of course it depends on the quality of your soil. If you have a sandy soil, like I kind of do too, because this is in the middle of an old salt flat, it's up on a hill, but it was once a big giant salt flat of springs and stuff weaving around. And so the soil's kind of a sandy loam, and I really need to add, I'm still working on adding more organic matter to it, but that's a good place to start. A sandy, well-draining soil, that's important to have it well-draining, and so you can use that. You just need to get some, organic matter in there, and just work on it. But you won't have the soil structure anyway. It's more important to have like a decent feeding compost layer of some sort on top while it's building, so that you can keep the moisture in, because it's really not going to save moisture at first. It's not, it's going to seem like it sucks moisture at first, really, to be honest.
So my question is, at what stage, like after the small twigs, that's when you do the layer of chicken shit with wood shavings?
Well, I had the compost and stuff on top as a top layers to help keep the moisture in, because that's kind of what I need with my soil so well draining. That's good, but it's, it doesn't keep them, it dries out until the seedlings get started. Like right now I've been using that grass, and I've still been having to give it a little water because my early plant starts are only, like this big. They're not, I have some lettuce and radish and stuff, and the other things are tiny. So, I have to, but they survived through it. They survived through freezing temperatures, and I planted that stuff a month ago. We've had, lots of frosts and below freezing, 20s, and there's lots of plants that even lettuce, like that lettuce is a French heirloom lettuce that grew back from seed from last year. See, it's a lot of work to get it started, but then afterwards, it's like lazy man's farming. That's what's so great. You don't, all these things that farmers do, like I don't pull my tomato plants are still in there breaking down, like, and I'll just take the parts that aren't broken down and maybe crumble them up and put them in my compost pile. But you just leave that stuff in your hugel, and it keeps the soil structure in there, and then your perennials come back, like, and polyculture is a big part of it, trying to plant in rows and things like that, keeping companion planting in mind is really good. Like one of my techniques is to grow radishes alternating with rows of carrots, because the radishes grow better, and then they kind of protect the little carrot seedlings while they're growing up, and then there's enough space for the carrots when they bush out, and they're not too close together. And so that's a time saving thing. And then when you get your hugel the next year, your crops are in there, and then you just kind of put your fork in there and kind of lift the soil, without disturbing it, because you've got soil structure, but you can kind of lift it because it'll sag down a little bit, and you'll see it, like it'll just like raise up a little bit. And then when you, and it's okay time to like try to plant from seed, and you might want to terrace it a little bit though, because it's difficult to keep consistent moisture if it's on a slope. Like I've done it kind of Inca style, where I made little terraces around it, and put little sticks around each terrace to keep the dirt from rolling down. And I grew the most awesome carrots I've ever seen. That was like the first couple of years I did it, and that's what hooked me actually, was because I was like, why can't I get a good carrot, and nobody grows carrots in their gardens. Why is it that hard? And so my main goal was to like grow a carrot, and I got these dragon carrots. They were this big around. They were huge. They were perfect. They had the most perfect like purple skin that you never see at the store. I've just never seen carrots like that. But it only worked because I terraced it and kept really consistent moisture, because otherwise your carrots will get woody. These carrots were even really tender and sweet. But the consistent moisture is a very important part of carrot growing in the early times. And onions are a good thing to plant if you have carrot rust fly, which is, I've never had troubles with it, but all kinds of farmers, even Everett out at the Biodynamic, has years where carrot rust fly ruins his whole carrot crop, and he's even doing it in a hoop house and all this. But I just grow onions nearby my carrots, and that seems to work good. It keeps them away, and I don't have any troubles with it. So there's a couple tips about, just particular things. There's all kinds of things though, companion planting things. And this year what I'm adding is German chamomile. I did tons of German chamomile, and it's supposed to be really beneficial. I'm going to put little parts of it around my hugel to help feed the, and do a lot more flowers this year too. Flowers are important as well. anyway, just rambling here, but
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you, Pi. In terms of the fertilizer, I already, we've been all putting all the chicken shit in one pile. We have 16 chickens, and I just placed an order for 20 meat birds. So we'll have them for about 12 weeks. So this summer we're gonna get a nice layer of that ready. I think I'll just, once I get, I just want to start building a pretty big one, and I'll just try it out in the summer.
I don't
Setting it
have
up.
that much experience since I've never had livestock, but I'll just say that, you know, that farm I work on, they're one of their best things, you know, they're a national award-winning egg producer, and they know a lot about chickens, but they have their chickens on flatbed trailer type setups, little houses, and then they just move them around and use those little electric fences that you can, you know, move around, and then they rotate in their fields and everything, but they just leave it in the chicken house, and then they call me the next year and I scoop it out, and it just gets layered and kind of aged in the chicken house pretty much. And then, but they, like with their cows, they you know, they do the biodynamic thing where you it's kind of an elaborate procedure where you age the manure and you pack them in horns with crystals, and, you know, leave them out in moonlight for certain periods of times. But the reality is a lot of that stuff's pre-prepared, like they just order it, you know, from biodynamic places. They're not actually preparing these things themselves and don't even know what's in them, you know. But I just stick to the things that a common person can read about and do myself, you know. So, but those are some of the things that biodynamic farmers do anyway. And but they age their manure, and then they add this, like they call it stuff like 501A, you know, it's like a yarrow based liquid, you know, that's been it, you know, it's very similar to the Korean style farming, you know, where they kind of get a culture going, you know, like how you can take nettles. If you have nettles, that's a great plant source, and you can add brown sugar to it and let it break down into a serum. I do it this way that this Bosnian guy showed me, where you just, you know, it's not any technique. You just throw them in a bucket with water. People just don't like it because it gets stinky, but I don't care. I just leave it out in the sun in a bucket, and it makes great plant food, especially for tomatoes. And if you have nettles, you know, you just pick them and throw water in them, you know, and it's that simple. And you don't have to, you know, because once you start getting too elaborate and you want to do a lot of things, it limits what you can do then, you know. So keeping it simple is a big efficiency. It, you know, it's not just because I all the way I'm lazy. It's just I want to do a lot of things, and you have to keep it simple to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and it's also using what you got here, like you said.
Yeah.
We're also getting into rabbits. So we have 2 right now, and I'm gonna get 3 more from my parents. So we're gonna have two breeding pairs.
Yeah.
But the rabbit poo pellets, like that's
don't need
liquid gold.
those.
We're gonna use that.
You should use that
or
first, because they don't need any aging, and set aside your other stuff and age it for a year. You know.
yeah, but the rabbit stuff we want to use in the main garden, closer to the house. Now, my question is, like, I was hoping to get sheep, but I think this year, well, I think we are getting goats this year. I left the deposit on a herd.
Yeah.
1 adult male, they're some pygmy style. 1 adult male, 2 females that both just gave birth, and 4 babies. So total 7 goats, and both females are milking right now. So it's a pretty good setup. I just got a week and a half to set up some kind of fencing system for that.
Yeah.
Is goat manure useful for Hugel culture, or?
Well, I don't. Those guys don't keep goats. They have pigs and cows and chickens is what they have, and so they rely on that, and they use their techniques. And the people that have goats around here make milk and cheese with it mostly, and they usually are But yeah, I know you can. I actually know from like cannabis growers have used goat for growing, and supposedly it works really good. And that's unfortunately I don't have any experience in livestock manures that much because I haven't been able to, and they have such an elaborate biodynamic technique. It's like I can't even give you all the details of like every, they couldn't even, because you're relying on this organization. It's this Demeter biodynamic, and he's an organic inspector and a biodynamic inspector, so he knows what's going on. But he's been for years in this area. But still, it can be a lot simpler, and you got to dig up dirt anyway. It's like you might as well, you're not going to have the soil structure and all those kind of benefits right away. It's basically you're making something that you can grow in that's maybe not as good, but it's going to be good later, and you just got to kind of get it started. But once you have a large hugel, then you do get and this is something that would definitely help you, is you get some composting, heating at some time. There would be like a couple of prime years in there where you'll get an extended growing season because the soil is a little bit warmer. And then in the early and the later season, once the wood gets breaking down, it can add that kind of a benefit to it, so that's something to look forward to. And it's just really low maintenance. Once you get it going, you don't have to do a lot compared to other cultivating type techniques, But yeah, I think goats can be a good source, and then if you can make cheese with it, you can have another, food
Yeah,
source.
we got the goats as my wife only drinks goat milk and goat cheese,
Yeah,
and so we're definitely going to get into that
cool. I'm jealous. That's
now.
what I've always wanted to be a cheese man. Knowing all the stuff about cheese, I'm like, we've got the best soil around here for goats. It's similar to
Yeah.
like Dutch soil.
If I'm setting it up and just composting it, is there any benefit in using like dog feces for anything, or is just stay away from that?
Yeah, no, you don't. It for like cats and dogs. Even though dogs might not be as bad, they do have like some parasites, and they're not living out wild on the land. And I don't know if there's but it's generally considered not to be safe if it's something you're going to eat, to use those, that. And
Yeah, no,
like,
I was thinking of like waiting a year on it, but just we have 3 Great Pyrenees. I've just dug a hole and I'm just putting it at the end of the property for now.
yeah.
But I don't think there's going to be any benefit to that.
Generally speaking, like a vegetarian type creatures will provide a better, manure that aren't like carnivores and stuff. I don't know that. I just know that it's just generally considered not to be safe. It might be, for all I know. I don't know anybody that's actually tried it to actually say, but you could still compost it. Like if maybe you just want some, like a flower bed or something, and you want some place to do, it's a way to process your dog manure, and just have a separate pile for that to, if you want to do that, and you can still get compost out of it. It's just that you probably won't want to eat crops that are, use it for crop foods.
Yeah, good call. Have you heard of leaving the ends of the mound open? So you can grow mushrooms out of it?
Yeah, the guy around here has done that, and it seemed to work good for oyster mushrooms anyway. I don't know about other mushrooms are harder. Like I've tried lion's mane, and it kind of worked out, but it's a more difficult one, where you got it. It sounds like you have like some good wood, like to get the wood plugs and everything. It depends on the wood a lot. Like I have a lot of aged maple and oak that I've collected for firewood, but it's very good for mushrooms, you know. Those woods are good for mushrooms. So the type of wood, you know, there's a oak and maple, I think, generally work pretty good for mushrooms for most culinary type of mushrooms.
Perfect. I'm just gonna check the chat if there's anything in there. If anyone has anything to add to this, you can just jump in or put your hand up. Are we doing on time? Yeah, so how is everyone doing otherwise? Had a pretty, as I mentioned, it's been pretty busy with taking the jump to get the goats. So that's going to be future episode, but goats and sheep, chickens, I mean. I think we're going to hold off on sheep, probably. I don't know if, other than the sheep manure, and they're much more docile than goats, and the meat is better, but I don't really plan on, the rabbits are for the meat source. So I think we're just going to hold off on getting sheep in this area. And we'll see how the goats turn out. There was a lady selling it because she recently got laid off and had to take a job that involves more traveling. So she can't stay at her farm too much. So she just would rather sell the whole herd as one. And it just so happened they just had babies. So I wasn't looking forward to the process of, waiting for them to have babies, dealing with the babies. And now we already have the baby goats, and we can just on day one jump straight into milking the goats, and then to keep the milk flowing. So we'll see how that works out. Neither of us have ever done that, so it's going to be a fun learning experience. And then I just got a delivery for all the fencing with the Great Pyrenees. We had some farmer fencing 4 foot high, but it's not holding them back. So the price was kind of steep, but we ordered up 6 feet red band woven fencing, pretty thick gauge. I think it's like 200 pounds per roll. So yeah, they dropped off 8 rolls. So we're going to be busy for the next week or so, setting up a small perimeter for the goats and the dogs. And we're really hoping, like, our one dog, the male is just over a year old, and the 2 females are 6 months. They've only been exposed to chickens, but they both grew up on farms. So we hope we're gonna try to keep them separate but close together, and then open it up and see how they mingle. I see we got some hands up. So Mark or Anna, I'm not sure about the order. If either of you want to jump in.
Mark, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, Johnny. Just real quick. I was just wondering, just with all the animals you're getting, I was just wondering if you had a plan, like for predators. Is the idea for your chicken and the rabbits to just keep them in cages? I know you said you got dogs, but just whenever I go to the farmer's market, it seems like I end up in a conversation about how the guys protect their chickens, and even things like skunks, and there's just so many things that are out to get them. I'm just kind of curious what you were thinking of for that, but definitely don't want to change the subject if you're not ready. Thanks.
No, totally good. For the chickens, like, there's a lot of predators for the chickens. There's hawks above, there's foxes, and I've heard even martins can do damage to a chicken. But the coop is like Fort Knox. It's I am gonna get like one of those rollout electric fencing for the summer times, and then we're gonna have them supervised to go out onto the field close to the house. Eventually I'd like them to forage into the forest, so I'm gonna have to see how we're gonna set that up. But in terms of other predators, the 3 Pyrenees, they don't shut up. If you've ever been around Pyrenees, they bark and you can hear them for miles. So we haven't had any evidence of coyotes, and even the one fox I saw early on that was investigating the coop. I haven't seen it since. I think just the Pyrenees, that's their job. They're going to be in the same fenced in area as the goats, and we will have them. They sleep in the ramp in the house right now, but we are setting up a kennel close to the goats. So I don't know how it's going to be for nighttime. Like the goats will be kept. There was an old shed that we just used for lumber and cardboard. So we're going to empty that up, and they're going to be locked up for nighttime. So, but during the daytime, the dogs will be in the same area, same fenced in area with them. But yeah, great question. Anna?
Yeah, I just was gonna say a couple things about composting with the animal manure. I work for a contractor who also runs a meat, a farm, and he has chickens, ducks, goats, alpaca, horses, and cow, Angus beef. And he puts everything all together in a pile. And I come and get a load once a year, and I've used it, and I've never had any issues. I don't know the science of it or the specifics of what it particularly gives to the plant, but just from my experience, I've always had really great growth with that manure that I use. And I pull from the bottom of the pile, so it's been sitting there probably for a year. But he's got all those animals and he just mixes it in. And then a lot of people raise chickens up here. It's like everybody has chickens, and a lot of people that I know will just take all of their kitchen scraps, all of their prunings and everything, and just throw it right in the coop. And then the chickens, walk all over it, they'll nibble on it, and then they poop on it, and it just creates its own. It's like a really easy, lazy way to just, take a bucket of your kitchen scraps and everything and your yard clippings and just throw it in there with them. And that's what a lot of people do up here. So I just wanted to, add that a little bit about the compost. And with the Great Pyrenees, yeah, man, that's like what they do. They like sitting out there barking at everything and watching the flock and stuff. So I think you'd be good. I lived next to a couple Great Pyrenees, and they ate every animal I brought home. They ate all of them. So they're quite protective of their unit. That is for sure.
Yeah, that's why we need that 6-foot fence. I don't want to. Some of our neighbors are pretty close, so luckily.
About the chickens that I feed to the pigs and the chickens. I take wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow of weeds and feed them to them. It's a great food source, and we have huge weeds that grow up that I have to tend to, and they eat the heck out of it. It's just a great. It really adds to the quality of the eggs. Having that, and it's a great. You got to do something with the weeds anyway, and they'd have too much for compost if they added all their weeds. They rely on the breakdown of the manure, which is mostly just so it doesn't burn the roots. Breaking down too hot, is like the main. But when it's aged, but the pig manure, they apply it, and he even like sells his pig manure because people want it so bad. People really consider that to be some prime fertilizer around here, and he gets quite a bit for it. But you just have to do it, apply it like if it's not aged, you have to apply it like 90 days ahead of time and let it break down in the field. Or those are some of the regulations. You got to do it 90 days ahead of time, so they consider it to have time to break down. So there's situations where pre-planting, and if you wanted to apply some manure in a field that you weren't going to plant yet, and do it that way just to save yourself some time and let it break down. And But yeah, that's great for the, and in the daytime, you can't hunt hawks around here. So they just let you use these noisemaker things to keep them away. But whatever it does is put shiny, like mirror-like stuff on the roof of the chicken houses. And in the daytime, that helps distract them, you know. And usually it's more in the early time of the year when there's, you know, like when they're training young ones, and they'll bring one around and kill a lot more than they normally would because they're training young ones. But that helps keep them away. That's a little daytime thing you can do. Put shiny, like I think you use some of that shiny mylar kind of material and put some on top. But I've seen people do it with just like mirrors and things like that too, you know. So that's something you can do to help with predators for chickens anyway in the daytime.
Yeah, in terms of predators, Anna, do you have a follow-up, or did I not put down your hand?
Oh, no, my bad. I'll put it down.
Okay, no worries. So yeah, it's to kind of try to keep it with the dojo theme. I'm gonna try to have. I always have some vitriol with homesteading, so but it's hard to bring it up to the main dojo. But I got mail from that was addressed to the previous owner, and he's the son of the patriarch that built this house and owned here till he passed away, and he lives down the road with his wife. So I went there. Very nice fella. Some of the stonework's not done on our house, so he's willing to come over and show me how it's done. He's very busy with work, but he did all the stonework. That's his business doing. So that was pretty good. He wasn't worried about the mask and shook my hand, so that's always a good sign. But we got talking about this property and everything, and I did find it weird that I've not seen a single black bear or any evidence of one and I've been like almost to the end of the 60 acres, and it's very wooded. And he told me in almost like a boasting, proudful way that he killed every single bear on that land except for one that was 600 pounds, and he couldn't get to him, and he ran off down. So yeah, I that gave me some vitriol, because I mean, we've seen a lot of deer here, a lot of turkeys, but yeah, in terms of the predators, it kind of explained why there's no predators here. I'm not worried about black bears. I think as long as you don't get in their way, they just, I mean, it would be nice to see a black bear, you know, with the wild raspberries on the end of the field. But yeah, that's probably whole generations wiped out, and it'll take several years, maybe a decade, before it gets repopulated in this area. So yeah, that's, I mean, it is what it is, you know. But it just it gets, I didn't want to, it was the first time I met him, so I didn't want to leave a bad impression, you know. But when he told me that story in a boastful way, it kind of it didn't sit well with me afterwards. But yeah, I do have I don't know if it's ethical. I have an idea what to do with turkeys. Right now, we had a lot of turkeys in the fall, but right now it's their mating season when they're laying the turkey eggs. And I've read that they lay at the edge of the forests nests about 5 to 17 eggs. And there's a lot of hunters in the area, so you know the population is kept in check. But I don't plan on shooting wild turkeys. They're pretty gamey too. But I did want to buy some turkeys to raise in our coop next to our chickens. And I'm wondering, what is it ethical to take some from the forest if we do find their nest and then raise them since hatchlings, or should I just stick to the farmer's market for that kind of stuff?
I've never really heard anybody doing them. We have lots of wild turkeys around here, but people mostly just hunt them. I know that they'll ruin your tomatoes. They'll like, a lot of people will get their tomato crops ruined by turkeys. Will come and take them all out just in one day, you know, and you'll be like, ah. But yeah, I've never really heard of anybody doing that, like with a wild turkey. I'd be curious to know if that would, I mean, I don't know about the ethicalness of it. To me, making a connection with the land is, you know, kind of making agreements with the land, and that's just up to you, you know, and that's the way I look at it. I make agreements with insects when you know, I go out and weed, and those guys are like, think I'll be bugged by it, you know, but if there's like a bunch of insects buzzing around, I'm like, come on, I could be enjoying myself so much if you guys would not bug me. Just stay away from me. And it works somehow. Like they'll hover around, but they won't touch me, and I'll just be out there. It'll really add to my enjoyment. And I just continue to find it to be true in some way, where I somehow can, the more I get connected with the land, the more I feel like I can make these kind of agreements. And to me, that's the rapport, you know, that you build up. It's like something you build up, you know. So I would encourage people using their intuition and trying to connect, and part of that is using resources, you know. And I know that if I was buying that land that you had, I would have counted on using some of the timber resources, you know. It's just sounds to me like you're taking the time to be, you know, you're not just willy-nilly going to go out there and, you know, and that's not to say that you might make some mistakes, but, you know, it's all about your approach, you know, as part of your connection with the land. And I think you're doing a good job the way the things I hear you, you know, I don't even hear experienced farmers thinking about the things that you're thinking of. So I think you're off to a pretty cool thing here. Anyway.
Thanks. Yeah, I am getting into the closeness with the one male turkey. Every morning he comes down to the chicken coop, and I feed him and a few females. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 4. Depends on. I'm not too sure how that circle operates, but there's nothing more beautiful than being close to a male turkey, and he lets out that deep vibration and ruffles the feathers up, and their face actually changes color when they're in a protective mood. But lately, all his feathers are down, and I'm almost feeding from my hands. That's how close he gets. So, but I mean, you know, there's no fencing. They can go to any other property. So I'm just wondering if, and it's not like all the eggs will survive this, you know, there's not too many predators, but there's other.
They can still fly up, like, you know, even a 10-foot fence doesn't stop wild turkeys if they, you know, they probably would only climb it if they got startled or something, but, you know, they easily can fly and up to a fence and climb over it. I mean, I've seen them do it on my fence. Yeah, I'm kind of in a, you know, even though I'm in town, I'm nearby a lake that, you know, it was one of those weird Tartarian amusement parks, like a inland salt thing that just sounds too fantastical to be true almost, and there's only like drawings of it, oddly. But anyway, there's a bird preserve in some part that they left undeveloped that actually used to be part of its natural landscape. And so I'm kind of on this bird path where they come across this valley and fly right over my land on their way. So it's like I'm in this bird highway. So I get a lot of waterfowl traffic flying over and landing sometimes, and even wild turkeys, you know, come run through, you know. And I've seen them, you know, they can climb any fence in the neighborhood and they make their way out to the bird area there.
Yeah, the tomatoes and because, you know, obviously you don't want to grow tomatoes just for the local wildlife either, but they will be in the greenhouse. They'll be at the top of the hill. So anything that tends to get, and, you know, we also have like a lot of deer here. So part of the fencing is also to keep the deer out of the vegetable area, but it is fairly close to the house, so we can keep a good eye on them. the dogs tolerate the wild turkeys, but if we have it fenced off and the turkey then goes into their fenced area, they will probably just scare them off. So that's what kind of hoping, but it's very interesting. That was talking to the other neighbor down the road. There's one wooded part, the eastern side of our property. He told us that it used to be a pasture with cows and everything, and you couldn't tell. It's nature took over probably in about 30-40 years, and it's a full mature thriving forest ecosystem. And when we got this property, you know, we weren't looking to get into the timber and lumber, but like you said, like you use the resources you have. It is very lucrative industry, the red pine, and it takes 50 to 60 years to get to full height, and a lot of these are at full height. And if they drop just out of natural causes, they just will rot away, and they basically choke out any other surrounding forest. So as we thin up the red pines, and I will be cutting just the red pines, there's already parts of the forest where birches and oaks and small spruces are starting to poke through the forest. So the idea is over the next couple of decades, get rid of most of the red pine and let the natural forest take over in its place. So kind of do it layer by layer. And then in the meantime, use the lumber.
Around here, a lot of people do a similar thing with cedar trees, because even though cedar trees are natural to the area, there didn't used to be a lot of trees on the prairie, and so you get burned out by natural grass fires. And so now a lot of people have cedar groves that have grown up, and people have had good results clearing out the cedar trees and letting the other like cottonwood trees and grow in, especially because there's fast growing trees around here that will move in. But you know, that's a regular thing around here that I see a lot of. And it, you know, some people do it in a stupid way, but you know, you can people consider it kind of a restoring of the landscape to remove those cedars, you know. And you can make a lot of fence posts with it. Like you can let the logs, and split them and let them age and make real easy like stacked fence posts with them and stuff for cows, you know. And then you can have like a cool 1800s settler style cattle corral, you know, just to add to the picturesqueness of, you know. And then plus you're using stuff off your land. And I always encourage the using of hand tools. Like right now I'm getting familiar with the use of a draw blade, which is just so much simpler and less messy and quieter. And then each stroke, you're just like putting your intention to the things that you're crafting. I scored these 20-foot redwood boards that this guy just, for some reason, he just wanted me to have for $5 a board, you know. And I didn't even know redwood was so expensive, but he gave me 30 boards of this redwood. So I'm shaving it off with this draw blade. It's so easy, and just getting down to the nice redwood, because it's got some nice grain on it and everything. But you know, a lot of it's what you put it to use for, you know. Like when you cut that wood down, some people just might cut it down and sell it to somebody, and then you don't get as much for it because of modern sawmill techniques. But if you keep a lot of it for yourself and learn how to split it, and you can get good wood out of it, you know. Like you can use the heartwood and not the sapwood and save that for yourself, you know. And you split it with the grain, learn how to read the grain run out, because right now they just run it through mills, and then they select whatever boards you get. But the ancient craft of splitting wood is just something I know about from violin making, because they you know, they go to a lot of trouble, like in Germany in the past, like, you know, they have like moon wood where they go out and they harvest the wood in the wintertime when the sap's low. And, you know, so you don't get a lot of sap wood, and it improves the quality for musical instruments to not have as much sap wood and things like that. But it's, you know, it sounds to me like that that red pine's not like it's a type of tree that will kind of take over, and it kind of needs a little tending, you know, if you want, and you already have a natural landscape to restore. And with the bears gone, you know, that could go a long way to establishing a relationship with the land, to like show a willingness to like restore it. And that's what I've been doing, is trying to tap into the history of this place and imagine what it might have been like, and those are the things I think about while I'm out working on stuff, you know, and building things.
Thanks. Yeah, with the red pines, and it's fascinating because year and a half ago, you know, when I was deep in Babylon, I was like more concerned what the next Netflix show was going to be, and here I am, like trying to figure out how the ecosystem of this particular forest thrives. And it's just, you know, my son, I take my son and my 8-year-old for walks every day, with the dogs too, and I would show him the difference between a white pine and a red pine and a spruce based on the needles and everything, and he seems pretty interested and he's absorbing it. And then he was my in-laws were over, so he went for a walk with grandma, and then she came back and she just started laughing. I'm like, well, what? He's like, your son he's quite comical. We were walking, and then he would start explaining to me, you know, to the grandma, about all the different pines and how you can tell 5 needles and 2 needles and what's a white pine, what's a red pine. And then the grandma asked him, it's like, well, how do you know this? And my son told grandma, oh, I got it from my dad. He's obsessed with trees. And it's okay. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But in terms of the red pines, I think they're also called Norway pines, but they were introduced about in the 50s because there was some disease or something that affected most of the white pines that were in the area that were used for lumber back then, which completely decimated that species. So they switched to a faster growing red pine. So it's not exactly abundant in the forests, but there's a lot of red pine woodlots everywhere. And what a lot of homeowners do, or property owners, they get a sawmill company to come in with the big industrial machines, and they just shred every single log, pick up every single log, and then you're left with acres of just sticks and just a big mess, and the whole forest is just destroyed. Really nothing to do other than bulldoze, and you have a pasture. So like my way of thinking is, before these trees fully mature, use it, sell logs if I don't have time or if I have too many. But whatever I can, I'm gonna make into lumber, possibly even sell the lumber. But I have a lot of projects I can use the lumber for. And with the price of lumber, it's almost like the perfect time to get the sawmill set up and do it in such a way with the least amount of impact on the forest, and let the natural spruce, and there is quite a few white pines starting to grow. There's actually, I'm looking at one now. There's a beautiful one here. I don't know if you guys can see it. They're just majestic, beautiful trees. But they're just scattered, and this is kind of how the system should be. There's a couple of pine giants mixed in with birches and the aspens and the maples, and you know, it's not natural to have 20 acres or 10 acres of nothing but red pine row after row. And that kind of keeps the predator, well, the animals out, and the forest floor is just destroyed with all the needles. Nothing but mushrooms grow there, really. But yeah, and we're kind of going off track with the Hugel, but there's any topic anybody wants to talk about. I'm kind of running out of ideas for today. But yeah, I appreciate everyone coming here. Like I said, we're going to try to do topical things on Saturdays, and some could be shorter, some could be longer. I'm not like old Big Bear Owen who can stream for 4 hours a day every single day, because I actually have a lot of shit to do. So, but yeah, I can definitely spend an hour or two and learn with you guys with exactly how we can best reclaim this land and work with nature and everything around us. But I have a question, Pi. For you said don't use any leaves for the mounds.
You know, that really might add to the acidic, you know, the needles, like when they fall on the soil, adds a, you know, kind of creates a acidic soil. And so I've stayed away from that just because I think it'll do a similar thing, and I don't want to make my soil really acidic. You can use that acidic soil, is good for a lot of berries though. Gooseberries and blueberries, and you know, a lot of berries will do well in an acidic soil. And so you can probably get some, you might find some out in your forest. Like I would imagine there'd be gooseberries and wild blueberries and stuff somewhere maybe around there. You know, I found 2 gooseberry bushes. I love gooseberries. I grew up eating them, and I was super stoked, and they just weren't getting enough sun. I only got 1 gooseberry, but I cleared some branches because, you know, I can't help where they're at under this tree, but I cleared some branches and they're already doing better. And I gave them a little water, and, you know, you don't want to give them too much compost, but I've got blooms all over them now. I'm going to have, you know, just from that one tending, you know, you might have a season where you have to figure out where stuff is, and then you can tend to it, and then the next year it'll be all sweet, you know. But I'm going to have so many gooseberries, I can tell already now, just by the early. They're already. I just saw it today actually. I'm like, gosh, I can't believe it. There's blooms all over, you know, and so I'm really stoked about that. And then I didn't know what all the trees were because it's hard in the wintertime to identify, especially deciduous trees. But I had 2 large mulberry trees. So I had a lot of berries that way too. You know, they're more of a fresh eating berry that they don't keep well, but you know, they're similar to they're like the purple kind of mulberries that they get sweet. And but there's a lot of berries that you can grow in acidic soil though. And it sounds like you have plenty of places where you could get berry patches going.
Yeah, this is kind of like the first year where we haven't been here for all the seasons. So, and I hear you trying to identify trees when there's no leaves.
Yeah.
It was a mission trying to find sugar maples, that's for sure. And
Yeah.
you know, I was trying to find as many as I could in the middle of winter, so that was fun.
Yeah, that's awesome that you have maple trees to tap. I was pretty stoked to see your maple.
I wish there were more closer to the house. There's quite a few way deep in the bush, and unless I get a snowmobile and stuff like that, it's going to be quite a mission to do.
One
But
thing I wanted to I got a hackberry tree, a huge giant hackberry tree, but I guess back in the 1800s they used to grind the hackberries and make them into a flour. So I'm going to try to make like some homestead food this year keep some of, you know, there are these hard little like brown, you know, they get kind of hard, but you can grind them up and make a flour.
yeah,
You might have hackberries around there somewhere too, you know.
yeah, I'll definitely be exploring certain parts and see what I find. I didn't have much success with birch syrup. The season was pretty short because it got hot real quick. But the first couple of days, the birch sap was just beautiful, but it got cloudy pretty quick. That's when it ferments and gets kind of nasty tasting. But
yeah,
for about 3 days straight, I drank probably 5 liters of birch sap.
Wow, that sounds like some type of elixir or something. I don't think I've ever had birch. I didn't even know that you could do that with birch.
Yeah, it's great antioxidant, and people in Eastern Europe especially, they tap the white birch,
Yeah.
and it gives your body a great vitamin and nutrient boost right at the start of spring. But in terms of making the sap, you need with maple sap it's 40-1. With birch sap it could get up to 200-1 ratio.
Oh,
And
wow.
you can't bubble it, you have to steam it, otherwise it goes bad. And I'm like, I don't have the patience or know-how. I've heard you need to do reverse osmosis to get most of the water out, and then watch the boil. So
Huh. Yeah, we don't have a lot of birches around here, so I just haven't. That's cool though. Some of my ancestors in Germany had a place called the Bachbreder farm. You know, it's like which means broad birch, but I guess it was surrounded by birches. It makes me wonder if they used to do that, if the old Germans used to do that kind of thing. I would imagine maybe they did. But,
yeah, from what I know, it's mostly an Eastern European thing. But there is a way, if you partially boil it and then add some lemon and some other stuff, and if you can it right away, it could last up to 6 months. But it was just such a quick season, and I had to go into work for a couple of days and came back, and I had about 20 liters that got all cloudy, and
yeah. How did it do when you drank it? Did you feel like infused with some kind of a cool thing when you were drinking it, or?
Well, it was very refreshing and slightly sweet, but not as sweet as maple sap. But as soon as it gets cloudy, it starts fermenting. You can still drink it, but it definitely has a much more bitter taste.
Yeah.
But
what was the flavor like? How would you?
Almost like water. At first, it was almost just like water with a touch of sweetness. So it's very refreshing. But when it's cloudy, it gets a little bit bitter, but it's still drinkable. So
is it something you got to do early in the spring, like?
Birch season is right after maple season, and the rule of thumb, and it was actually quite accurate, is when you see the first 10 mosquitoes of the season, that's when you tap. So as soon as the mosquitoes come out, that's when you tap. It has to be above freezing at nighttime.
Okay.
And with maple trees, it still has to freeze at night. Anna, go ahead, Anna.
Thanks, Johnny. With the birch trees, birch trees are like the fertile mothers. Birch trees are like the first trees to repopulate a barren land, and they have the shortest lifespan, so they're the first to die and give life back to the soil. And the water that is inside has been known as the living water. You know, it's the life of the forest. And when you know, if you listen like really, really closely and out in the middle of nowhere, you can actually hear the gurgle of the water moving its way up the tree in the right birch tree. So it's actually something that's been harvested for like very, very long time. It's like that first sign of life in the springtime. So that's just what I have always heard about the birch tree, and I've also listened to the gurgle as well. I've never drank it. And also with the grinding of the wood to make flour, what I have learned, anything that I have ever learned about consuming wood as a human, which is very novice knowledge that I have, it's the cambium layer of the bark that is ground up into the flour. So it's not all parts of the tree. It's a very, very thin layer in between the outer bark and the inner bark. And that's what I've learned to be safe to consume as humans.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. White pine is another one it's very edible. You can roast the bark, but white pine is just in such you know, the only real white pines I have are the majestic, you know, probably over 100, 200 years old. I'm not going to be eating their bark, but I've heard about the white birch that you eat the middle layer, not the outer, and not the bark, obviously, and not the trunk, obviously, but the very thin layer in between, and it has a lot of nutrients. But in terms of birch sap, it's okay to consume when it gets cloudy, but after a certain point, you see like white chunks floating in it. That's when it gets toxic. And that's so just something to be aware of if anybody were to tap it. But it's already past the season anyways. It has to be just past freezing at nighttime, and it only lasts for about a week or two tops. And I liked your message, Amber, that your husband, who's Lithuanian, also has tapped birch. So yeah, it seems to originate in the Eastern European cultures. My mom told me about it a couple of years ago, and she's from the Czech Republic.
That's pretty cool. I kind of unlocked another little detail of my ancestry here, imagining it sounds to me like they were right in the region where they probably certainly would have been tapping birches. I didn't realize it was such an ancient thing, you know.
And eating of the bark. I also read that the native tribe Erdanjak actually translates to bark eaters, and they used to anytime they saw a tall white pine, you know, they didn't cut them down, but if one crashed down due to wind or a storm, they would send the locals to harvest as much of the bark as possible. So very interesting. It helped them survive through winter in some cases.
The white pine is also very high in antioxidants in its needles. Just making the tea out of needles is really good for us too.
Is there any difference between red pine and white pine for tea, or just white pine for the needles, I mean?
I personally don't know. When I go to consume something, I spend like all my time just learning that one species. So I personally have only consumed anything from the white pine. And the next thing that I've been researching is the spruce tree. So as far as the difference between the red pine and the white pine, I don't personally know. I'm going to guess that they have different chemical makeups just because they are a different type of pine. So I personally don't know. I do know that white pine have high antioxidant, and there's one other L word, you know, a long scientific word that is a property that is really beneficial to us in the winter, but I personally don't know about the other species.
I think maybe the flavor, like I think maybe the red pine might have a higher tannin contents, which usually translates into more bitterness. And then the white spruce or the white pine might be less. In Minnesota, they have a lot of white pines, like Norwegian pines, and I've had, you know, tea from it. You know, it's pretty good if you make it right. And you get needles that are fresh and young ones, you know. I think there's a flavor difference though.
There's another benefit with birches, and I think Danny mentioned it once in an after dojo. There's that mushroom that grows mainly on birches. It grows around the outside of the trunk. You cut it up and it's brown on the inside. Takes about chaga. I don't know if
Yeah, I have
right.
some. If you guys want to see, I can show you what it looks like.
Sure, because there is one. I was going to take a picture of it and post it in Dojoearth, and I want to ask you guys what you think.
Yeah, that's another great thing about the birch is because she has such a short lifespan, she's the first, to die and the first to bring new life. And I have a horse hoof, there's turkey tail, and chaga, and there's another polyphenol or poly something mushroom. I'm just grabbing the chaga right now. I have not consumed the poly
I don't see a video. I don't know if you're trying to show the video.
I'm just trying to grab everything real quick before I turn on my video. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
All right, here we go. So chaga, here we are. So chaga is, it's very easily confused with what is called burl. Burl is when a tree almost kind of has cancer and has this overgrowth of very hard, dense, dead cells. So the best way to identify it is the dark black. Hold on, I tried to switch. There we go. All right, so this is chaga right here, and this is the outer layer that you'll see before you chop into it, and you literally can just nick it and it should fall off the tree. However, this takes like 4 to 7 years to grow into maturity. So if you do see black on a birch, you want to make sure it's hard. And then the inside, this is where it was attached to the tree here. The inside is golden and orange. It was known as the gold of the woods or the forest. And you never want to boil it, I've read. You can use like one little chunk and make a whole pitcher of it. I was going to grab my pitcher, but I'll just go to the next. You can use it for so many things. I can post about it. And then this is the horse hoof, which is also it grows on the birch tree. And this inside layer is what we use. This is also called the cambium layer of this mushroom, I believe. I could be wrong, but this is used to transfer embers from the fire. So they would, ancients would use this as a torch to carry, from camp to camp, or just to restart the fire from the next day. And it's also medicinal if you use it immediately. And then this, I believe, is a polypore, but this I personally have not ever consumed and I don't know much about it. But those are the 3 biggest ones that I know of.
Kind of a
Thanks.
region are you in that where you get chaga mushrooms and stuff? I wish we had those growing around here. But...
I am in mid-Maine. So I'm 2 hours from the coast and probably 6 hours from Canada, depending on where you go. So I'm up north, and
usually you hear about the Northwest when you hear about people foraging for mushroom stuff. I haven't really heard about in Maine though.
Oh goodness, there's a plethora of mushrooms up here apparently, but I have yet to learn. I've spent more time with plants, and I really only know much about I've only ever consumed these 2 and also the turkey tail. The turkey tail is another one that grows on the birch tree. We have massive birch up here. I mean, massive old birch. There's I've seen at least 4 different species of birch out in the woods here.
Wow.
Yeah, like we have a huge diversity of food up here. I think just because there's fresh water everywhere. you know, so when there's water, there's life.
Cord slips have to go through a caterpillar head.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that, we don't get those kind of mushrooms around here. We do get morels and morel mushrooms and meadow pinks that are kind of like the predecessor of the button mushroom. You know, they're kind of a big white mushroom and they're pink on the bottom. But I'd have to probably I'd have to grow any other mushrooms. But we do get chicken of the woods. That's you know, it's kind of if you see a kind of a shelf mushroom, you know, these kind of mushrooms usually around here only grow on downwood, but it's kind of orange and white, you know, when it's young, and it tastes just like chicken. I mean, it tastes, and it's not one of those things where it just tastes kind of like chicken. You're just like, oh my God, I'm eating a piece of chicken, you know, and it has a texture to it. But that's a delicacy around here that people will not divulge their chicken of the woods spots, you know, because they enjoy it so much. And but if you get it if you see any like orange shelf mushrooms, you might want to see if it's a chicken of the woods and get it while it's still kind of a bright orange before it hardens, you know. But these are, I don't know that much about these medicinal kinds, you know, that like the chaga, and that takes so long to grow, and medicinal type mushrooms, but just the fresh eating type ones, you know, that you can get around here. But I'm jealous of you guys with all your exotic mushrooms and stuff and forests.
All right. Thanks. Maybe we should do a whole show on mushrooms and stuff. I didn't realize the time, and I'm at like 1% battery. So I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. If I drop out, then it died on me, but yeah, great talk, and thanks to all who showed, and have a great weekend.
Well, thank you so much, Johnny. Have a good weekend too.
Yeah, thanks for hosting this. It's a great, you know, it's great to share. Everybody's going to have so much to share as they go along. You know, it's going to be really fun.
Bye, guys.
Bye all.